Hey friends, welcome to Bokeh, a podcast exploring the ever-blurring lines between the personal and business lives of professional photographers. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm bringing you a special episode of the Bokeh Podcast today called Workflow Wednesday. During these special edition episodes, myself and my co-hosts will focus on helping you develop more efficient daily and weekly workflows around post-production, communication, task and project management, time management, file and image management, and yes, the list does go on. We're going to save you an incredible amount of time in your work week, and we promise not to be too nerdy. This podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the professional photographer. Just visit photographersedit.com.
Are we good? Are we live?
Yes, we are live.
We are live officially.
And we are recording.
And we are recording as well. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. Happy Workflow Wednesday to you. We're Nathan Holritz, Rich and Heather Smith, Haylee Gaffin with Workflow Wednesday on the Bokeh Podcast, special edition, or special series, I should say, of the Bokeh Podcast, talking about workflow, how to work efficiently so we have a bit more of a life as photography business owners. How have you all been? It's been, about a month since our last show?
Really?
I think a month, closer to the month. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't feel like it's been.
Yeah,
we're doing well.
Yeah, we're doing well. Thank you.
Are you? I don't know. Can we like break the fourth wall a second? You said you guys aren't getting along right now. Do we need to like have a therapy session on air?
That was a joke. I pulled out of the way to show you guys our new fiddle leaf fig,
fiddle leaf fig.
And then Rich took it and ran like we're sitting far apart because we don't want to be close, and it was all
I like
a
our
lie.
fiddle leaf fig. So we're like you just sit over
So is that an actual plant? Like that's alive?
Yeah, we're going to try to keep it alive. We typically don't have a green thumb. I mean,
it's literally,
it's like things will go well for a while.
And
something will survive for a period of time, and then if you have to leave town or you get a little busy or someone gets sick, you get thrown off your routine and everything dies.
I don't give it. The chances of this thing surviving is not that high, but it was a good deal, so I couldn't pass it up. And Heather's been wanting one for years, and so I came home with it, and she was so excited.
Fiddle leaf fig, yeah.
Yeah, and so
it's called a fiddle leaf fig.
Correct. Yes, you got that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so Haylee, do you have any interesting show and tell or any visual show and tell?
Absolutely. Let me show you the one plant that I've kept alive for over a year and how it looks today.
Okay. Is it bamboo or is it
bamboo? And it's supposed to be the easiest to keep alive.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
there's some green leaves on the top.
Yeah. I roll my eyes when the salespeople tell me this is a hardy plant. You can't kill it, and I'm like, watch me.
Yes, exactly.
Watch me kill it.
We got some hardy mums to put in the backyard because literally in the name is hardy. Hardy, and
not so much.
The face should come to
the elements.
Brown thumb, I guess. I'm not sure what's the opposite of green. So
no marital distress. No marital distress. No.
And Haylee, your plant is at least somewhat alive, so that's a good thing as well.
Agreed.
Otherwise, I'm not allowed.
I don't really have plants in my house. I'm like, I say house, I still live in an apartment. In fact, if you were to visit my apartment, it looks somewhat like a college bachelor pad. I think it's very minimal in nature, not a lot on the walls, not a lot of furniture. I do have. For anybody watching the video version of this, and by the way, if you're listening to the Bokeh Podcast, the audio version, this is a live video broadcast, if you will, on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/photogsedit, PHOTOGSEDIT, the Photographers Edit Facebook page. I got a new arm for my mic that, I record a lot of podcasts, and this is a Rode mic arm, and I was excited about it, felt like it was going to be an upgrade. And right now, this thing is like taking up a third of the picture and looks really awkward and ridiculous. So I'm gonna have to figure something out about that next time. I also noticed the light that I'm using is casting this weird shadow on my eyes, so I'll have to fix that.
You need like a boom mic,
so,
like right up here,
like right here?
right off screen, taking up tons of screen real estate. It'll be awesome. Yeah.
Since we're talking about things that are disappointing to us right now,
okay.
This is what I'm most disappointed with in my life right now. I got some new glasses and I've been wearing. They're dramatically different than my other glasses, and not one person in my life has noticed at all. So literally,
wait. I want to see the before and after though.
Okay, so
These are substantially more.
Yeah. So these are my new glasses.
Okay.
All right. These are the glasses you're used to.
Oh, you're totally right. That's crazy.
They're hugely
Yeah.
different, and nobody's. In fact, so much so that I was like, I honestly don't know how I feel about them for the first couple days that he had them on. Yeah. And I was like, give me a minute because they're so different from your other ones.
These are ones I've been wearing for years.
Yeah. Okay. Put the others back on.
Okay, is it Netflix or Disney Plus or Amazon Prime?
It's Disney.
Okay, cool. There's this
Disney Plus.
Okay, there's this series called The World According to Jeff Goldblum.
Oh,
yeah.
And
in it, he wears these real chunky black glasses. And Rich is
like,
do you think I could? He does. And Rich
I'm
said,
like, I want some.
Do you think I can pull those off? And I was like, I think so. Order them. Let's see.
I know. I got it from Zenni, whatever Zenni. They're like frames and lenses, everything, $70. Done. Let's do this.
Nice.
And they take my prescription that is expired because I can see completely fine.
Okay. Now I'm not so encouraged. I was an optician in my past life years ago.
Oh my goodness!
Is that a big no-no?
That they would accept your or expired prescription rather is a little bit concerning. But I think part of the reason I didn't, because normally I notice glasses. In fact, you ask people at conferences, I'll see them in their glasses and I'll compliment them in their glasses. Partially because I was in the optics industry and I noticed them, but maybe part of the reason I didn't say anything is because they fit you, like they're natural. They seem natural to you.
Or maybe too, I wonder if the fact that we're not face to face and we have a screen between us has anything to do with it too.
I mean, that could play into it, but that's crazy that I didn't notice it right away.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
No, they're cool. Yeah, I dig it. I dig it.
Thanks, man. You just call me Jeff Goldblum from here on out.
Okay.
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so now that like half our listeners have left and like, what in the heck are they talking about? This is supposed to be Workflow Wednesday.
Yeah.
By the way, this show, I think from the very beginning, I was like, I want to have a show where, in fact, I tried to do this with the podcast, our normal episodes at the very beginning. I want to have a show where we can just like hang out, have conversation, and at some point, hopefully add some value. I realized.
And then you have me.
Well, no, I realized that like relatively early on, I was like, you know what, I can't, like the free form approach to conversation with photographers who are not necessarily educators or speakers naturally didn't really work so much. Because again, the end goal is to add value in some way. So we're a bit more structured on the podcast. We're making up for it in Workflow Wednesday. It's a little bit more free form and I love it, by the way. Yeah. It's good to have Rich and Heather here. A little bit of context for anybody that's new to the show. Rich and Heather have been photographers for what, 12 years now? 13? 12 years?
12. Yes.
Sure.
And I've known them for as long or even a little bit longer. So longtime friends. Haylee is a photographer herself, has a studio here locally, and is also doing marketing work for photographers at Bokeh and Milu. So we're all like, we all have ties to the photography industry for quite some time now. And the goal with the show is to lend a little bit of our perspective on the topic of workflow and more specifically efficiency in workflow. We are going to talk a little bit about establishing prices and in the name of efficiency, hopefully simplify the conversation a little bit today. But before we get there, one of the things that we like to do pretty regularly is to do a bit of an industry snapshot. Let's talk about something within the industry, whether it's tech related or otherwise, that you all think is kind of interesting, a conversation that's happening right now. What might that be, Rich or Heather?
Well, so I thought this was really, really relevant right now because I was really curious about because what is the biggest news out there right now is the coronavirus. I was just curious about like how is the coronavirus actually affecting the photography industry, and it's really interesting. It being apparently Nikon and Canon have both postponed they have these new flagship models of cameras coming out, and they literally have to delay the because they cannot get supplies from their third party supplier for their cameras because of the coronavirus's factories shutting down, all kind of crazy things, you know. So I was wondering, like, have y'all heard any, there's like conferences being canceled and what are postponed. Like, I haven't heard yet of someone being so crazy about canceling their wedding, but I mean, like, it's probably not unheard of. I mean, like, or postponing their wedding. I don't know. Have y'all heard anything going on with baseball?
What about you, Haylee? Have you?
Yeah, so not as far as weddings go, but a retreat I was going to at the end of the month had to be canceled because of it. And I mean, it's a big deal because not only is the conference struggling with like having to refund people, or I mean, this is conferences across the board because I've seen so many being canceled. But like all of our Airbnbs and Verbos and hotels we're struggling to get the money back because a lot of them don't cover issues like the coronavirus. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'm currently in an argument with Verbo about it right now.
Oh, really? VRBO, yeah. VRBO. You said Verbo. I was like, oh, yeah, VRBO. Okay.
Well, so I called and they call it Verbo on their recording.
Yeah. I listened to their commercials. And the commercial, they do say they say Verbo, and then at the end they go VRBO.
I didn't know
that. VRBO.com. You know?
We learned something.
I know. I called it VRBO up until 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Value added right there.
Boom. We can quit this podcast. Right
Let's shut it down. Thanks, guys. Have a great Wednesday.
Yeah. Everything down here is downhill from there.
There are a couple of conferences coming up that we're sponsoring, and I haven't heard anything about them being canceled as of yet, crossing my fingers. And I'm supposed to travel out of the country late next month. And actually, right now, Jill and I are talking about taking our kids to out of the country as well for spring break. The interesting thing, I mean, obviously, the deaths in particular associated with this are so sad. But as we look at the way that the economy is being affected by this, one of the things that's happening is flights are dropping like drastically in price point. And so if you want to travel and you have a healthy body and you're not too concerned about actually getting the virus itself, now's the time to at least snag up some flights and go somewhere. And we were actually just looking last night. I mean, literally prices dropping, it seems, even as much as by about half what they normally cost. It's pretty cool. And again, if you're in a place where you can take advantage of that, it's a great thing. Also, buy up some cruise line stock right now because
yes.
I was looking at Royal Caribbean. Let's see. I was looking at Royal Caribbean, and there was one other. Let me just pull it up. Yeah, it's actually Carnival Cruise Line is down. Like in the last month, it's down over half. So they were $45 a share. They're down to right now like $21 a share. And it might take a while for that to come back up, but you can make some really good money on it.
It'll come back up.
By the way, please don't take that as actual advice. Tongue in cheek. But I may actually make a move on it because it seems like there's a great opportunity in that realm too. But
that's awesome.
I hope that this blows over. I mean, it's one of those things. I know there's, and it's funny how like Facebook, people are getting on Facebook and becoming these experts about it and voicing this opinion or that thing and sharing this article and getting all dogmatic. And it's a little bit odd because most of us don't really know which end is up when it comes to actually talking about a virus. But I will say that I've traveled even just recently. Last week I was in San Diego. The week before that I went to Vegas. And it seems as though, despite all the drama portrayed by the media and even the drama that we see on Facebook as all these people are sharing their opinions, most people traveling are just kind of going about it quite normally. There were a few people here and there with face masks on, and maybe this week it would be a little bit more intense, but in many ways, it doesn't seem like there's a lot to worry about. Now, I realize that's subjective and the people are dealing with it. It's a whole different conversation, but I can't help but think that in some ways it's being blown out of proportion, or at least fear is being induced in a way that I don't think is helpful.
Right. And that's, again, like, I'm not going to speak like I'm an authority on there, but it seems like, it's the media has latched onto this thing, and what we have found is, it's like
the statistics are in the average person's favor.
That you have more of a chance to die from the flu than from this. So
it was strange that Rich went to try to buy toilet paper for our family yesterday. Not because we're in a panic.
Not because we're in a panic.
Because we were running out of toilet paper.
Because I live in a house
he had to
with
go to
3
3 stores. He had to go to 3 stores to buy toilet paper.
Really?
Oh, I went to Costco and it was completely gone.
Nothing at Sam's.
I went to Sam's. So eventually I went to Home Depot because no one thinks about buying toilet paper at Home Depot. And guess what? They have it there. So apparently.
The word's out. So don't be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, I should stockpile on it and then sell it for very expensive.
Yeah,
I did have a photographer friend this week who was posting online about having to cancel spring break travel plans to Italy, not because she was concerned, and you guys probably know I'm talking about Melody, but not because she was concerned about being exposed to the virus, but because her daughter would be under a mandatory 14-day quarantine upon her return, which would keep her out of school. So these are also implications that we have to think about as people, and school and work and business and all of that. It's all intertwined. And so,
And California is about to, several conferences got canceled in California, but California is about to impose any conference that's less than 200 people, or any conference over 200 people will have to be rescheduled or canceled. So, it's affecting the tourism and obviously hotels and Verbos. And so,
Verbo, we know now. I know now.
So that sounds like a cute robot, doesn't it? Verbo.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Rich was reading some crazy statistics about the percentage of people worldwide whose jobs depend on and are related to the travel industry. It's very, very interesting, to think about, just the sheer economic
how this affects everybody.
Implications of this. Yeah. So.
Yeah. To be clear, I don't want to make light of any of it. It's just it's hard not to feel like when you're healthy and you're going about your day normally and outside of having a hard time finding toilet paper, you don't see a significant effect on our life. It's easy to separate ourselves from it, I guess, and maybe oversimplify it. But it's important to maintain perspective. I'm glad you highlight that.
Yeah.
We'll kind of leave that alone for the time being.
Yeah, sure.
And
we don't want to get ourselves in trouble.
No, not in the least. Let's just jump right into this conversation about pricing. And I think it's maybe some would say this is kind of a stretch when it comes to workflow, but I think actually photographers spend a lot of time working on pricing, certainly talking about pricing. And I feel like, and we may have addressed this a little bit in past episode, but I feel like this topic of pricing has been overly complicated through the years, at least the years that I've been in the industry, the last 20 years or so. And so I hope that in some way we can help simplify that conversation a little bit today for the sake of efficiency, minimizing stress, and ultimately enabling some of our listeners to be able to go more effectively, not only establish prices, but ultimately serve their market effectively and build a business. So to that point, I'd love to, maybe we can just all take turns because we've all either been photographers or are photographers. And let's start with Rich and Heather. Tell me a little bit about how you first established pricing, maybe before you gained the experience and the perspective that I hope we can lend today. What did that look like?
Like a disaster. That's what it looked like.
Like a shot in the dark.
Like the only hope that we had was having you as a friend to kind of. I remember
That's why it was a disaster.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. That was the only that and God's grace did we ever survive that first couple of years. So we really heavily leaned on. I remember going to Barnes and Noble and we had we just sat and talked, about pricing, and so that you actually helped helped us out a lot. So, but I mean, at the end, at the beginning, like.
Start with the beginning. Where did you even? Were you just like pulling numbers out of the air? What did it actually look like?
In fact, I remember the very first time I actually charged someone for my services, and I was I just threw a number out there and just had no idea whether or not this was fair. Was would they laugh at this pricing? Would they just go? Thankfully, it was fair, and they did accept it, thankfully. But
I think the advice we got early on in our photography business from other friends who were more seasoned and further along in their businesses than we are was, I think I remember hearing the advice to be a confident enough photographer by the time you start charging people to where you can actually make a profit from the very beginning and not get yourself stuck in a demographic of people that their word of mouth referrals are going to be other people looking for the cheapest possible photo shoot that they can find. But that still has an element of ambiguity to it, because what are we worth and what are we comfortable? It's like if you throw a number out there because it's maybe the highest number that you would feel comfortable charging based on what you make, you're sort of backing yourself into a corner,
right?
As far as who you're able to market to.
Yeah, that's what made me nervous, because when I threw that number out there, I would have said no to that number. True. I mean, like, that's too expensive for me, see you later. But at the same time, it wasn't critical for us. I mean, like, we did have some time to sort it out, because we didn't rely on that income. I was not a full-time photographer at the time. I was still working at an engineering firm. So that was where I primarily got we had a predictable income, and we didn't need so thankfully all the money that I made for this first several years went right back into the business, like 100%, buying new equipment and all that kind of stuff, which is that's a great way to do it if you can do it.
And that's back when we would upgrade more frequently and buy the gear that came out because we could. But what were you going to?
I want to highlight something that you were referencing multiple times there, which is feelings. Like, as photographers, and we see this, in fact, our industry is rife with this conversation. Everything's so much is based around feelings right now. And it made me think of, like, imagine if you're, as much emphasis as we seem to place on how we feel about something in the moment, that's how we're making our decisions about business. And certainly as early business owners, that's kind of all we know. We don't have the information, the perspective. Imagine if, like, a marriage or a relationship was based on our feelings in the moment, how absolutely chaotic that would be, as opposed to making a decision objective of that, or an objective decision outside of whatever I might feel in the moment, and go into that marriage, that relationship, with the decision about what we actually want to create. So there's intention involved, and it's not just based on how we feel in the moment. The distinct contrast between what those relationships would look like is interesting to think about. And in a similar way, if you have a business that is based on how we feel in the moment, or how terribly we see ourselves, or whatever it might be, it's going to be this roller coaster of a ride being a business owner. The last thing that we need to be doing is base it on feelings. But I mean, I've been guilty of the same thing, so I can absolutely relate.
Right. Yeah. And that's the nitty gritty of it, is that at the beginning, that's how our decisions were being made. Now we've come a long way since then, and honestly still have a long way to go. Yeah. It got a little more scientific and mathematical a few years later, but at the beginning, it was about comfort level, experience level, not wanting to under or overvalue yourself based on your level of experience. And all of those factors come into play, along with what Rich mentioned is this critical income? Is this supplementary income? Is this a one income family and you have to provide for the family and pay all the bills based on this income? Or is this a hobby? What is our goal? I think that those are really important questions to answer. Do
you think that this conversation about deciding how much we're worth is still too arbitrary in nature? I have a hard time understanding it. Like, I understand the argument that's made sometimes in our industry about experience and how that might translate to how much we charge. But the reality is, and of course we'll get into practically how to more effectively establish prices in a little bit, but if we're not making decisions, again, outside of how we happen to feel about ourselves, or this arbitrary number, somebody's going to say, well, after 3 years, you can charge this much. Another person's going to say, after 6 months, you can do the same thing. There's real no objective, definitive fact that drives that decision. So I think there's a better way to go about it. Do you really think the conversation is how, we should even be asking the question, how much am I worth?
Good question. I mean, we've been told by a financial business guy that we met with, the question really needs to be, how much do I need each month? What does it cost me to live? And that as our starting place. And so we actually sat down and figured out that number, a few years ago, but that was several years into our business. It wasn't a question we asked at the very beginning,
Okay, so let's
it's amazing how crazy important establishing your how much more secure and confident you can be in your pricing when you do all this research, and you know for a fact that you just didn't make this number up. I remember when, clients would just say, "Oh man," they would inquire with me, and they would say, "I need this, and like, how much would it cost to have this in my wedding collection or package?" And I'm like, I had no rhyme or reason. I just I'm like, that sounds like it would be around this
Right.
number, you know?
Right.
And again, every time I I met with someone, and because I had no definitive a reason for my pricing, I would just start like literally sweating and just so nervous. I was just so nervous, you know. Oh man, it was a blessing in disguise. One time I was at Starbucks, and
crazy story.
And I got finished meeting with a potential client, and
this is years ago.
It was years ago, and this guy came up to me afterwards. I was packing my stuff up, and this guy had been sitting at a table near us enough to be able to overhear a conversation. And he said, man, your presentation was really, really good. But man, when you got to the pricing, you start stuttering, stammering, apologizing. He said, you really need to get more confident with your pricing, because that can really kind of show a whole lot to your potential client. He said your whole other presentation, I was on board, but when you start talking about pricing and you just started and just had no confidence whatsoever, I was like, that was probably some of the best advice I
feedback.
Had. Yeah. I'm like, thanks for overhearing my conversation. And
unsolicited advice from a stranger isn't always bad.
It's not always bad.
If we can be teachable, you know.
Yeah, because it's like I just never heard it from someone else's ears.
Perspective. Yeah.
Because my potential client's not going to say that. You're like, dude, you need to take a chill pill with, But anyway.
I'm glad you remembered that story.
Do people still say chill pill?
No.
Sorry. Right.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, Haylee, I'd love to hear your kind of backstory. What did this look like, setting prices for yourself when you started? Because you've been shooting since 2011, is that right?
Yes. So 2011 was when I started shooting. I was a freshman in college, and I remember it's so embarrassing now looking back on the thought process behind it. Was I'm going to spend an hour shooting. I'll probably spend an hour in the car, and I'll probably spend an hour editing. And my thought process was, I work at a retail shop making $7.25. So I'm going to charge $10 for every hour. So I charge $30 for an hour session, and I still get it on my timeline every once in a while in my memories.
Wow. Yeah.
Now booking $30 sessions. And I didn't have a ton of bills. I didn't have overhead. I was not doing business appropriately. I did not have a license. I wasn't paying taxes on it. And I was not considering any of that because I was in college. I had scholarships that were paying for everything during my freshman year. And looking back now, it bumped up every couple of months. So there's posts that I'll see where I was charging $75 for an hour session. And now I would never, ever even consider a $75 for an hour session, just because I know how much goes into it and the reality of what it is to be a photographer and what you need. And so
the funny thing is that you still put more thought into it than we did at first. Even though you were wrong with how much you still put more thought into it than I did. I just literally, I didn't think about anything except.
Well, how'd you come up with? Didn't you charge $250 for our first session?
Yeah, because but
that's a better idea than me.
Because literally, I was talking to an old
probably Nathan and
Matt Dunmore. Yeah. So
just blame on me. I gave all the good advice.
You did. You were full of good advice.
Yeah.
I'm totally joking.
I will say too, I was editing on in iPhoto back then.
Yeah.
Nice.
I wasn't even editing in Lightroom.
I was in Photoshop, so it just took me forever to edit any. No touch editing there. So
yeah. When it came to weddings, though, I remember my very first wedding I shot for free, which I don't recommend doing that anyway, just because I had never even second shot a wedding when I shot that first wedding. And then the first one I charged $200. And then the next one I charged $400 and split it with my second shooter. And there was no rhyme or reason as to why I did that either. It wasn't an hourly rate. It was just, $200 is a huge deal to a 19-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, isn't that funny? Like, I think part of I can speak from personal experience in a way. I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. And so even the idea, and then I know that when my former business partner and wife and I got married, we were making a combined income of $24,000 a year combined. And so the idea of getting a check for, even $500 was a big deal. Then you start you get these checks for $1,000 and $2,000 and $3,000, and you're like, I don't even know what to do with this kind of money. Like, somebody just handed me a check or cash or whatever, and like, how do I even manage it? There was no real understanding of what it meant to have money and then actually proactively manage that money, much less actually think strategically and intentionally about how to charge, why, and then what to do with that money when you get it. Like, it was just such a series of foreign concepts.
Yeah, I always think that if we had known then what we know now, I could have been a business major in college if I'd known we were going to end up running a business. But then at the end of the day, I don't know how hands-on, tangible, practical that would have been either, because I really, having not taken that path, I actually don't know how practical that education would have been to the real life, day in, day out managing a business.
You probably would have married me. You're like, this guy's an idiot.
No. It's just, I do feel like a lot of trial and error. And I do also feel like mistakes are a really great teacher. And even those embarrassing moments of having unsolicited advice from a stranger can be really teachable moments. If we can avoid making massive financial mistakes in the meantime that we end up paying for years down the road. I feel like there's some wiggle room for some mistakes and some naivete in those early years of running a business, but how much better for the person who starts off with all the information that they need to make informed decisions and begin, a really strategic way of pricing themselves from the beginning, how much could be avoided,
I love how naivete sounds really cool, but it's really just, you're stupid. Like, I was just dumb. I made a really dumb mistake.
Exactly.
Decision. No, I mean, it's fortunately, we've all been lucky enough to learn from the mistakes and the experience and actually move forward. So we can laugh about it now, but it is quite hilarious to look back on. And on that note, actually, I'm going to actually share my screen here because, there are a number of funny things about this, but when we talk about the pricing. So let me know if you all can see this.
Yes.
I've seen this before.
We've literally seen this document. I love it.
I love it.
Okay. So for everybody that is listening to just the audio version, I'm sharing currently one of my first wedding contracts.
This is great.
2003. First of all, the business name was, get this, Expressive Photography.
The font is amazing. Your branding is amazing.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. The font is terrible. It's this kind of scripty font. I don't remember the name of it right this second. It was probably some cheap Microsoft, like some default Microsoft font, script font. Expressive Photography, this is wedding contract. Of course, I've blocked out the client's names, but this is May 24th, 2003. And we have the desired wedding package, also in script font, and then basic wedding package, expanded wedding package, whatever that means, and then deluxe wedding package. The basic wedding package started at $600. The second expanded wedding package started at $750, and the third started at $950. Now, this is actually not the first wedding. The first wedding I ever shot was I photographed for $350. I was using a Minolta SLR film camera, 35 millimeter film camera, borrowed somebody else's exact same camera. And Amber actually shot like literally one frame that day, and they ordered multiple prints just from the one picture. So it was like, okay, Amber should be shooting too. But we charged $350 and we lost money because we had to develop that film.
Yeah, you did.
It was just this kind of arbitrary number that I don't, to the way that Haylee described it earlier, like no rhyme or reason that I can remember just landing on this particular price point. And we lost money because of it. And honestly, for the longest time, I don't really know how we landed on the number. I think it was like, well, okay, we charged that much for a little bit of time, and then we should probably bump it up a little bit. I know that I think that there was some kind of looking at our market and seeing what they were charging.
Right.
And we're new to it, so we're not going to quite go there. But then there also was an opportunity to stay at a lower price point and grab up a bunch of clients as well. We went from shooting 15 in the first year and a half to 30 the next year. So it bumped up. But when you're charging price points like this, naturally you're going to, as long as your work doesn't suck, people are going to book it up.
Yeah. I love the $600 one. It includes a wedding album.
That's how much our wedding albums cost.
That's how much. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I also love that you guys have like $200 like leaps from package to package. Like,
right.
Like that's enough to like differentiate one package from another is just a mere $200. I mean,
right.
Seriously, this is great.
This is great.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically, what does that cover? The income tax on that amount? I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Right.
But, so very simple answer to the question is ours was also kind of the choices, the decisions were ultimately kind of just arbitrary in nature. And this idea of kind of thinking about the big picture and letting that trickle down to the decisions about pricing, that understanding didn't come for way too long. But to that point, I actually want to get back because we have about 20 minutes here to finish up the conversation. Let's talk about, so that was what it did look like. Let's talk about what it looks like now.
Not much different.
So much different.
What would you say would be kind of the driving, I mean, if you were to name 2, 3, 4 ideas that drive the way that you price yourselves now, can you share those with our listeners?
Well, so one of the biggest things we did was actually get a financial, what would you coach?
Advisor.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and so, I mean, I guess the biggest advice, if someone was asking me like, hey, how do I price stuff? And I go back to what Heather said, like, what is your objectives for being in a photography business as well? You know, some people are like, hey, this is just supplemental income. I use this money to go on vacation, to pay for our mortgage or, you know, whatever, you know? And so I mean, like, and that like, I don't rely on this income to actually survive. Then you can be a little more flexible.
And I feel like there's a lot of that going on in our area. I feel like there's a huge number of photographers in our area who are multi-income families, who the photographer, in fact, many times we try to have a get together and a lot of the photographers can't schedule wise make it because they do have full-time jobs or a part-time job in addition to their photography income. But the question for us became, what do we need to survive every month? How much money do we spend every month? And we talked with this financial advisor about this number. We know what that number is. We got on a budget. We started using Mint to track our expenses. And we knew what we needed to survive. And I feel like that's a good place to start, because not only do you need to know what it costs you to live every month on a personal level, but you need to know what the cost is of running a business. So, you know, that for us came into play. Like early in our business, we weren't paying for business insurance. There's things that we weren't doing that we are doing now. And so our cost of doing business is an important piece of this puzzle. And so knowing what those numbers are helps us make an informed decision about what to charge. And obviously making decisions about what our goals are in terms of vacations and how much excess we want. What do we want our margin to be? You know,
do we want new clothes?
New glasses.
New glasses. I can only afford $70 glasses. I'll be like, boom. So
you need to bump up your wedding package.
Exactly.
No, we've talked about this over the years. The amount of money that used to sound like a lot in our bank account no longer sounds like a lot of money. We want a larger margin. We know that 30% of that is going to end up going to the government.
Yes. That's probably the biggest things. We're like, figure out whatever that number is and then add 30%. Because the government is going to, like if you just say, hey, I need $60,000 to survive this year, and then just divide that by, you know, I want to shoot 20 weddings, therefore blah, blah, then you're not going to see $60,000. You know, the government's going to take about 30%.
So now, not only do we know what our cost of living is and our cost of doing business, but we also know what our products are worth based on those numbers, what we need to sell our products for. So, a client can add and subtract and move things around from their wedding collections, and Rich knows exactly what each of those items is worth, therefore what the wedding collection should cost with and without those different items. Everything is itemized, and that our client can look at their invoices and see exactly the value that's been assigned to each of those products, and our time even. That's another thing, is that for a long time, we just threw me in as a second shooter for full wedding day coverage. Like, we just come together as a package deal, and then we had kids and everything got more complicated. We were paying money for babysitting. I was away from the kids and I didn't want to be. Like, these are life value decisions that you have to make. And so we started valuing my time and charging for me as a second shooter by the hour, because most of our clients don't need me all day long on a wedding day, so we value our time differently too, as a result of determining our pricing,
Okay, so I was taking notes as you were talking. I'm just going to read these off. So starting, and I actually love the first question. What is your objective? Like, period. And that's a pretty broad question. So then, of course, you have to get specific. What do you want out of your personal life? As a result, what do you want out of your business? But then you said, what do we need to survive? And interesting, by the way, for everybody listening in or watching, note that there was no conversation about self-worth. There was no conversation about how they felt. There was no conversation about how long they'd been shooting. There's none of that. At the very, and this is, and by the way, you all's line of thinking is very similar to what I'm going to share as well. So this very much resonates with me, but it comes down to just very simple, practical questions, which is A, how much do I need to survive? B, how much do I need to run my business? And C, how much extra on top of that do I want? Do I want to put in savings? Do I want to go on vacation? Do I want to invest? And that's really it. And then you have to figure out, and I'll just go and throw this in because, again, this is very similar to what I was going to share. The other component, I'm curious to get your take on this, is time too, right? So I might be able to make $500,000 a year if I work 80 hours a week, but I don't want to work 80 hours a week. So now I have to adjust my desires, not just the needs, but the amount on top that I want to make to coincide with the amount of time that I'm willing to put into the business as well. What is you all's experience with that? What is your thought with that? I mean, do you limit the number of weddings that you're shooting in a year for the sake of time management? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, I think you don't know your limit until you reach it. At least for me, I mean, I think when you said that y'all shot 30 weddings in a year, and 1 year. And I know people who shoot 50, 60. Yep. I'm like, I don't get it. There's no way for me to actually have any kind of life outside my business. So for me, it's about 25 weddings a year. If it's more than that, then I just don't feel like my clients get the kind of service that they desire and they paid for.
Sure.
So things start, so.
Yes. I had something to add, but I lost it in the moment.
Well, while you're thinking about that, Haylee, maybe you can go ahead and jump in and share too, kind of what you've learned about pricing, and then we'll come back to you, Rich and Heather, because again, what I have to share is very, very similar, and maybe that'll kind of trigger some of your thoughts as well. Go ahead.
Haylee. Okay.
Go ahead. She's going to lose again.
I was just going to add.
Take a chill pill, Nathan. She's about to talk.
No, I was just going to add. We've talked about this before, but we do turn down weddings if we get an inquiry for a time that we want to be out of town. And so that's just one thing I was going to say is that.
Oh yeah. July 4th.
Right.
Not gonna be
so I feel like that relates to the conversation in the sense that, yes, we're turning down some income. That doesn't affect our pricing per se, but yes, that affects the income based on our, the priorities that we've set as far as being out of town and things like that. So,
that makes sense. Yeah. You don't have, the extra $2, $3, $4 grand would be nice. You could spend on a vacation, you could do this thing, that thing, but you also need the time for yourselves, with your family, with your kids, and the traditions matter. The list goes on, but yeah, that's great. And you can't replace that as an experience in time for the sake of just getting a couple extra grand, which if you had to, you could make somewhere else.
Right. Oh yeah. I would get burned out so quickly. Anyway,
sorry about that, Haylee.
So yeah.
You're fine.
Take the floor, Haylee.
So
Take
I
the
have
mic.
very similar reasoning, principles, reasons for how to come up with what I want to charge. And like you said, with a lot of photographers, it's not their sole income, which was me for most of the time that I was shooting actively. So now I'm not shooting as much as I used to. And like I guess like back in college it was, and like right after college, my money that I was making from photography was paying off my student loans. Like that was the only reason I continued to shoot on top of a 40-hour-a-week job. And when I paid those off, it was like this huge weight was lifted. And I decided that like that day, I'm done with weddings. I don't ever want to shoot another wedding. I did, and I didn't hate it. But at the same time, like weddings were not for me for the long term. But then it comes down to what is it, the goal that I have? At that time, it was to pay off student loans. Like I just did not want them over my head forever. Now it's pay off the rest of the debt. Like I'm in a season of life where this hustle is what I'm into. I don't have a ton of responsibilities. I don't have other humans to look after. And so for me, that goal is to hustle I hate the word hustle, but hustle.
No, I love it. I love it.
It is getting overused on Insta.
Yeah. But if you need humans to take care of, you can take care of us.
We volunteer.
Yes, we would love to be taken care of for a while. Adulting is so hard.
Yeah. So for me, it's a lot about what is that goal? And right now that goal for me and my husband is to pay off all debt. Like we are semi following Dave Ramsey. And I believe we've talked about this on the podcast before, maybe even our last episode, is paying off debt. Like that's where we want to be. And then whenever that debt is gone, that's when we'll slow down life and enjoy more. I mean, we enjoy life now. We go on plenty of vacations a year just because that's important to us. But those are the things, like picking those and choosing what we want to spend money on and how much we need in order to spend that money.
So does that in any way, I mean, is there, in this kind of phase of so-called hustle, is there a cutoff point for you? Like, do you, whether it's evening or weekends or whatever it might be, like, do you ever take a break, or are you so into it that you're just like, go all the time?
So with my husband's job, he works 12-hour shifts. And on his 12-hour shift days, I work longer days. I don't work a full 12 hours. I don't think I'm productive in doing that, but I'll work and take a break and then work again. And then his weekends are usually his weekends that he works are weekends I also work. So I will plan those weekends for additional projects, or shooting if I want to get in the studio and shoot, or whatever that could be. Those are how I'm breaking up my time so that I am still putting him as a priority when he's in the house or around. But then when he's gone for work, I can be productive as well. But I mean, I've definitely hit my cap, and I think most people do, where it's like, okay, I can't work another hour this week, or I'm going to be exhausted and it's not good for me. And I mean, I've had to go to clients and say like, hey, your project is going to be late because of this reason, but I will get it to you first thing on Monday. So it's one of those things like.
But I love that you started very similar to Rich and Heather with an objective. You have a particular objective at the moment. You're working toward that. And then once you've accomplished or completed that objective, then you move on to a different phase, which is driven by a different number of hours put into work in a week, and potentially a different financial goal or set of goals. It's all driven by intention, though. And that's, I think, what makes the big difference is we have a clear idea of what we're trying to reach. And that drives the decision-making when it comes to pricing, as opposed to, again, how do I feel about myself? How do I feel about these prices? How do I feel about this money? Or, again, how long have I worked in the industry? How long have I been a photographer? Is my work actually good enough? All of these questions having answers that are largely arbitrary, and they can flex and flow and depend on the situation, or, whether or not I had bad pizza last night. Like it's so arbitrary in nature. it's so wonderfully simple if we start with a clear objective and let that kind of trickle down to everything. And so just to follow these thoughts, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because I feel like I'll be repeating, but we talk a lot on the podcast about the idea of a big picture view. And big picture view is driven by an overarching set of goals, those being certainly financial in nature. Also, and Heather and Rich brilliantly spoke to the significance of those financial components. And we're talking about meeting personal needs, paying bills, very basically, being able to cover costs of doing business, then put some money aside and also be able to pay for vacation. And then the time component, how many hours you want to work in a week. And these two significant factors within this big picture view, the overarching goals, should ultimately determine the business model, which should then determine the target client, which should then determine the pricing. And there's that trickle down effect again. It's very intentional and it's big picture. And that's what drives the actual prices that are established. And you're not kind of working backwards. You're not working based on your feelings. It all starts with that big picture intention. Again, I think Haylee and Rich and Heather have kind of summed this up pretty brilliantly at this point, so I don't need to expound on that too much. My encouragement, though, to everybody is that's listening in is to, if you are a little bit confused about your pricing, take a step back for a second. Be sure that you know what you're actually trying to achieve, first of all, with your personal life. And this may sound like way bigger picture conversation than you even expected. You just want to know how much to charge for that portrait session. But the smarter way to go about it is to have a clear objective, as was discussed. And that objective, or those objectives, can be decided in the context of what you want out of your personal life. That will then trickle down to everything else, as I mentioned. So I love the simplicity of this. What this looks like in nitty-gritty detail is going to vary for everyone. Some of you may have to sit down for an hour to lay out your big picture view and each of these components that we talked about. Some of you may do that with a partner, some on your own. Some may take a few hours. Some of you may take a weekend and go away and figure this whole thing out. But let those bigger picture ideas drive then how you're charging the target clients that you're trying to serve, and then how you're charging them. And that's a much more objective and less stress-inducing way to go about the conversation about pricing than to simply ask the question, am I worth it? How do I feel today? What is the photographer down the street charging? What is my favorite photographer that I just heard on stage last week charging? And all these other kind of objective or arbitrary, talking points that ultimately have little value and little bearing on how we are actually wanting to function in our own personal lives. Let that actually drive the decision making. So
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I will leave it at that. I don't want to ramble. You guys have been great. I really appreciate all three of your perspectives. And for everybody listening in, if you have any thoughts or questions, anything to add to this, don't hesitate to jump in. This video, and again, for those of you listening on the audio, this does go out on Facebook, facebook.com/photogs edit, the Facebook page for Photographers Edit. The video will live there. Don't hesitate to jump in on the conversation and comment. And if we get some conversation created there, we can bring that to the next Workflow Wednesday and further the conversation if we need to. For those of you that are watching the video version now or later, you can hear the audio podcast if you just go to Bokeh, Bokeh podcast.com, or just search Bokeh Podcast on any of your favorite podcast players. You'll find it there. Haylee, do we have our next Workflow Wednesday scheduled at the moment? And if so, what is that going to be about? Who's our guest?
So we don't have a topic picked yet, and I would love feedback. So if there's something that we haven't covered that listeners would like to hear, feel free to shoot me an email at Haylee@photographersedit.com. But that will be on April 1st, so all jokes will be happening, I'm sure.
Oh boy.
Rich, you've got a pretty high bar.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah, talking about comments, I want people to comment on my glasses.
I was just going to say.
My ego is a little like, I need someone to say yay or nay, do they like them or not? I need to know people's information. And internet is probably the most honest place out there. I mean, people are completely okay being cruel on the internet. So let me know.
I honestly feel like I saw those glasses before, and that's why I didn't. I just feel like you've had them for a while.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's so funny.
Nope.
And it's so crazy. But and a very similar feeling to Haylee. They just look familiar. They look like you.
Someone said, Kristen, who was just on the podcast for a brand position consultation, said cool glasses with the little glasses emoji.
Nice. I like it.
Made as weak as made.
I want to be friends with her on Facebook. You know, tell her
Does she mean it, or is she just wants Rich to stop fishing? That's the question.
So I think I need to memorize Haylee's glasses. So if she does get some new glasses, I will.
These are new.
Oh my goodness! How new? How new are those?
3 months ago I got them, but they are the exact same frames, just a different color.
Oh, okay. Right.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think mine was dramatically different. So okay.
Yeah. No.
Well,
So
thank
good
you
to-
everybody for listening in, for watching. If you're watching the video, again, bokehpodcast.com. If you want the audio version, that'll be out later today, Wednesday, March 11th, by 6 p.m. Eastern. You can listen there, and then check out all the other episodes. I just recorded episode. Let's see, yesterday, what was it? Episode 360. No, I'm sorry, earlier today, 367, I think. So
Wow.
there's a lot of content. I think we have close to 350 episodes already published. There's a lot of content coming up. A combination of our regular podcast episodes with a variety of topics, some brand position consultations, which is a really valuable conversation for our industry at the moment. So make sure that you go to bokehpodcast.com or your podcast player, check out those episodes. Thanks again, Rich and Heather and Haylee, and everybody have a wonderful Wednesday.
So good
Thank
to see you guys.
See you guys.
Thanks so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the professional photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.